I came across a video by this guy who makes videos under the name Museum of Tarot, and he asserts that the Ra contact is a hoax created by a propaganda program that Henry Puharich was a part of, that he says was intended to change society by creating a new religion. I don't think this is true, but more importantly, I don't think the argument Tarot makes is very strong, and it's severely lacking in evidence, so I'm making this video to respond to some of the flawed accusations he makes. I'm going to go over the arguments he makes first and what's wrong with them, and then I'll tell you why I don't think the Ra contact is a hoax. Basically, Tarot argues this guy Henry Puharich, who was a famous parapsychology researcher, developed technology for synthetic telepathy that he used to beam thoughts into people's brains to fool them into believing they were channeling beings of higher consciousness. He says Lyle Watson and Ira Einhorn have testified to this claim. He also says Einhorn was set up for murder and sent to prison for making statements against Puharich's group. So at some point, Puharich moves his lab from Maine to Mexico and starts a center for testing on children for psychic abilities. That center burns down one day and Puharich moves to Mexico, so Tarot says there he meets Don Elkins, which is how he wants to relate this whole thing to the Ra contact. Here's the problem basically with his argument. The core of his argument basically comes down to this offhand comment that Einhorn made to a reporter where he suggested that maybe the Ra contact was affected by Puharich in some way. Einhorn, by the way, was known as the Unicorn Killer and went to prison for murdering his ex-girlfriend Holly Maddox. And Tarot says Einhorn was framed for that murder by the CIA. I could not find any evidence that Einhorn was set up for that murder except his own testimony at trial to that idea. Einhorn also went on the run in Brazil for 23 years before being brought to trial, so I guess we're supposed to believe that the CIA murdered his ex-girlfriend for some reason and framed Einhorn for that murder, but wasn't able to prevent Einhorn from running away to Brazil, and the CIA couldn't find Einhorn in Brazil for 23 years. The idea that we would conclude the entire Ra contact is a hoax based off one offhand comment from a questionable source like Einhorn is a bit of a stretch. After the Einhorn stuff, Tarot plays a bunch of videos that he wants us to think are suspicious, including an interview with Don and Carla in 1978 that was posted by the Ra Contact YouTube page itself, in which Don and Carla reference their work with Puharich, and they talk about a surgery he did on them. Now, Tarot wants to say this is evidence that they were involved in fabricated telepathy, and he actually says perhaps Puharich taught Don how to make Carla say what he wanted. Again, this is all pure speculation, and weak speculation at that. Carla is supposed to be the victim in this story, but Carla is fully aware of the work of Puharich and the surgery and everything. There's no evidence of what the surgery was, or if it was successful, or if it had anything to do with the Ra contact. Puharich and Elkins were big figures in the parapsychology field at the time. It's not surprising that they knew each other and they were interested in each other's work. Tarot also provides no explanation for why he thinks Don would have teamed up against Carla, or any evidence for any part of this theory for that matter. His last argument is so weird I almost don't even want to respond to it. He plays a scene from a movie that Carla acted in and wants to say that this is her reenacting her actual real life where she got snatched up and zombified by a cult leader, I guess. He also makes this baseless claim that in the movie Carla must be whacked out on something or in a dissociative state. Again, no evidence, these are just baseless, unfounded smears. Here's why I don't think the Ra contact is a hoax. What would be the possible motivation for creating such an elaborate hoax? Did they do this for money? Well, they give away the raw material for free. All the audio recordings are on YouTube, and the books are available for download for free on their website. And by the way, Jim and Carla spent most of their lives living lower middle class lives in rural Kentucky, which is not exactly the high life, so I don't think money makes any sense. So did they create a hoax as part of a CIA propaganda program, like Tarot wants to say? Well, that would be odd because Ra warns us often not to trust the government or the people in power. What kind of CIA propaganda material tells you not to trust the government? Ra tells us all kinds of messed up things that the government is doing, the US government is doing. Underground weapons programs, etc., all kinds of things. Nothing about the Ra contact would make you like or trust the US government. Quite the opposite, in fact. So if anything, the CIA would be interested in suppressing something like this, not promoting it. Okay, so maybe they created a hoax to bolster Puharich's reputation, influence, and power. Again, Ra is repeatedly wary of Puharich. When asked about him. He doesn't want him to join the channeling sessions. He tells Don when he asks him about Puharich that Puharich is not of the right, quote, vibrational distortion, and that Puharich should meditate and pray on his intentions to make them more pure. Why would Ra be so critical of Puharich if Ra is simply a puppet of Puharich? It seems that if Puharich was up to no good, Ra clearly knew that. So what about the idea that they did this to create some kind of new cult or religion? Well, again, what kind of cult not only has no church, no compound, and no organized membership, but actually advises its believers to disregard the whole raw contact material if it doesn't speak to you as an individual. Again, what is to be gained here for anyone? And the last point I want to make, which I think is really important, is what about the contact with Quo that began years after Puharich and Elkins were dead and continued even well after Carla's death to this day? Quo confirms everything Ra says. Is that also a CIA-controlled hoax? There's just not enough here to smear Don, Carla, and Jim, and to disregard the hundreds of hours of extraordinary, deep, beautiful raw material as a CIA propaganda effort. It doesn't make sense, and there's no evidence for it.